So we've had user experience, we all know UX, but now we have AI experience, so let's call it AX, where people experience AI in different ways, and then also development of developer experience as well. So I like this whole paradigm change in terms of experience, and like it's almost like a Venn diagram with 3 circles, the UX, the AX, and the DX.
10,
7, 6,
4, 3, 2. Okay. Wow. Actually, right. We would love to get our panel members up next. Super excited to introduce each of them. Chris, if you'd like to share who our panel members are, I'm not quite sure if everyone can still hear me, but Hallie, why don't you start with Michael?
Sure. So Michael is a leader in Gen AI, specifically as it applies to different business and enterprise. I'm going to let him give more of his background because it's so vast. And T, you want to go back and forth and popcorn there?
Yeah, let's do it. So next up, we have Cobus Greyling, who I've had the pleasure of having on the show previously. He's somebody who I absolutely admire. Also, somebody who creates a lot of research content. His diagrams are unbelievable. His newsletter is unbelievable. He's going to be joining us, followed by Chris Mattman, who has also been on the show, somebody I also met in the audio spatial days through COVID, and somebody I absolutely admire in the space. And you can introduce Sean.
Yeah. And then Dr. Sean Guillory, good friend of mine, really fascinating background combining cognitive science with AI, robotics, and even autonomous agents. So really excited to hear what this panel has to say.
Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Just a quick note, Chris Mattman had to drop, but we do have Lorenze J here from CrewAI that is willing to jump on too. So I'm going to have Lorenze introduce himself as well.
Sure. With that, thanks. And that is our wonderful producer, Chris. He is phenomenal. Thanks, Chris, for being in the background and producing us. Why don't we go around table and we can turn Hallie and myself off. If each of you would like to introduce yourself while waiting for the others to join. Cobus, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll let you go. So my name is Cobus Greyling. If you're wondering about my funny accent, I'm South African, born and bred, still based in South Africa. And I just love doing research and writing every day. So I've got a dream job. It's all I do, read papers, build prototypes, and publish it. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks, T.
Lovely to have you. Michael, when are you go next? Yeah,
Hi.
I'd like to go.
I can go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Michael Rulfo. I'm the executive chairman of Beta.mn. We are the largest and oldest tech accelerator in Minnesota. I'm also a founding member of AI Circle. That's how I got recruited to this panel. And my day job is I'm a principal enterprise architect at Boston Scientific, which is the second largest medical device company in the world.
Great. Thank you.
And I can wrap it up. So,
Yep.
hey everyone, I'm Lorenze. I'm a software engineer at CrewAI, and we're the leading multi-agent framework company. I day-to-day do software engineering for the open source product, dealing with the agents, to dealing with agentic RAG use cases. And yeah, that's it for me.
Great. Lovely to have you all. So while we're waiting for the other speakers to join, let's jump straight in. Now, obviously, would love to start with the what. Where are you seeing AI agents or agentic agents showing up in either your personal life, professional life, and what exactly or which use case are you most excited about currently? Cobus.
Can I?
Popcorn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I really love what Jeremiah said about, search being dead or search dying slowly, 25% a year. I think he said, and I love the way people speak about search being replaced by answers, or search 2.0. And something I find interesting is that the race is on to capture search 2.0 the way Google captured, search 1.0. And something I find interesting that my observation is companies like OpenAI, XAI with Perplexity, they're all racing for distribution. And they're leaving the APIs behind and the builder tools behind because they want to capture distribution to be the next Google. And that's something they're prioritizing that. So that's something I find very interesting. And I liked the idea that, search was clunky. You got links, some sponsored, some people optimize SEO, and you had to like take all those links, open tabs, curate the data, and then synthesize your own data. So I love the idea of, answers or search 2.0, where your data is synthesized for you and you get a custom created data according to your, description.
Love that. Lorenz, obviously you're at Crew, so I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we use a tool called Cursor. So it's kind of like having AI agents on your IDE, right? So, it's interesting enough working at an AI company, but also leveraging AI agents every single day. We also have the open source platform. So what we've done as a company is actually built a crew that reviews a lot of PRs. We have over 100 people submitting PRs every single day to our open source library. And sometimes just me and another person, it's hard to maintain, right? So we've actually created an agent that gives suggestions. It understands the code base. It knows, what particular files you should kind of contribute to or take a look at. So yeah, I would recommend people taking a look at how we use AI agents in our own company. And one of that is through our PR review crew that we have on our open source library. So yeah, again, from the IDE level to going end to end to, pushing code, we have somebody review or agents review
Wow.
the code that gets pushed.
Wow, it's exciting. What about you, Michael?
The way I would like to answer that question is two fronts. First in the personal realm. So as I mentioned, I got recruited for this panel through the AI Circle. So it's kind of we're a think tank group of AI professionals, all stripes, data scientists, architects, AI architects like myself, engineers, product leaders in the space. And so I'm doing some research on AI agents this year. I think it's the year of the AI agents for sure, 2025, and it's everywhere. So on the personal front, as I'm doing my research, I have my own private platform that's designed to help build out agents. And so I'm constantly experimenting, building my own agents. And I'm just really fascinated by the ability for agents to become personal. You can, I've experimented with different types of data sets and different kinds of architectures around agents. And so while I'm experimenting with different architectures, just really impressed with the ability for agents to be adaptable, to learn, to produce really impressive results across the board for my own personal workflows that I leverage every day, from creating different kinds of summaries to doing research and to gain insights on whether it's AI or just different topics, whether it's healthcare. I'm in the healthcare field. The second domain that I'm seeing a lot of discussion and research on agents is on the enterprise front. So my specialty is enterprise AI. So I worked for 4 different CIOs for Fortune 500 companies. I have 20 years of experience, doing tech in these large scale, truly enterprise level environments. So I talk to individuals like engineers, from Crew, from Microsoft, from OpenAI, every week, right? So because I'm their target audience, so to speak, literally. So if they're
Literally the target.
literally, when I like to say when your title is enterprise architect, like you're a bullseye on your back, right? Yeah, I know. So not some head nods here. So, but and on the enterprise front, there's a lot of automation being had, and I see it mostly right now, which is contrary to the hype in the market right now around agents as a whole, but really are what I call platforms, individual platforms, right? That is different than what is being discussed in the marketplace, which is really enterprise level cross-platform orchestration. That I'm not seeing that happening. I don't think it's going to happen realistically, not in a production true enterprise grade environment for at least another year. And we can get into why I feel that way, but I really feel that this year there will be agent deployment in production, but it will be what I call in the sandbox of a single platform. So I do see that. I mean, I talk to my peers across the board, other AI architects, and we have this debate, but pretty much the consensus is for this year, we're talking single agent, single platform deployment. So that's reality at a Fortune 500 level.
I mean, the complexities of having, single agents even deployed is enough, let alone thinking about a multi-agent architecture that has access and information across platforms and cities and states and countries, and I can only imagine. So that kind of leads me into my next question a little bit, right? How is the architecture going to change? Do you see, this is for the panel as a whole, do you see the way we present information on websites will change over time, right? If it's agents viewing websites, do we need the same user experience? How do you see software changing how it presents information? I would love you just to talk about some of those fundamental changes for each of you, and maybe Michael, because you're in the hot seat, you can start, and then
Go wrap around, right? A snake with a snake draft, right? Fantasy football, right? So that's fair. That's fair. Well, I mean, I live this 5 days a week, right? So I see evolutionarily. I am maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but I do feel like the advantages that agents present as a technology from an architecture standpoint are just, in my opinion, just too good to ignore. They're super adaptable. They can learn. They get the feedback loop, right? So and they can hold context across different environments rather consistently. That is a huge advantage in the enterprise. Like
Yep.
for those of us that have been working in enterprise level solutions at the platform level or at the app level, that is technical like constraints for years. And agents have the ability to overcome that in a meaningful way and produce superior results more efficiently than the current AI solution architecture, the popular ones like RAG, which don't necessarily leverage high-end agents, right? So architecturally, as an architect, whether you're AI or any kind of architect, the technology presents so many advantages. So as long as the issues with that the agents present are overcome, and I have full faith that it's going to be overcome through engineering and just better cost model for agents because they are more expensive. The GPU clusters required for agent solutions are much higher because it's much more complex, right? The platforms are not cheap, right? So I know I'm talking to the right audience here, right? So there's an expense from the assets, but like I think the advantages over time are just too good to ignore, as at least at the enterprise level for architects like myself. You're not, I wouldn't say forced, but as a competitive advantage, it's definitely, there are definitely some hardcore technical advantages to leverage agents. So that's going to change. You're going to see a lot of distribution. You're going to see a lot of more orchestration platforms like Crew and
Yep.
agent builders arising, just getting more and more advanced. So, that I think that as the agents get more and more popular and as multi-agent solutions really get deployed and really become popular, the need for a more complicated and more advanced platform as an orchestrator and as a monitor for production level agents are going to change enterprise level architecture. It's going to be radically different than what it is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Cobus? What are your thoughts on that?
Three things came to mind. So the one thing is experience is going to change quite a bit. So we've had user experience. We all know UX, but now we have AI experience. So let's call it AX, where people experience AI in different ways. And then also you have, as mentioned earlier with Cursor, you'll have development of developer experience as well. So I like this whole paradigm change in terms of experience, and like it's almost like three, like a Venn diagram with three circles, the UX, the AX, and the DX. Then second to that, something I'm seeing is that there's been a few studies on the accuracy of AI agents. And you can find those on Archive, and the accuracy of general agents, computer use agents, or web browsing agents is actually dismally low. So the Agent Factory, there's research from Anthropic and OpenAI. And I'm seeing companies introduce something one can call an agentic spectrum. So they introduce levels or, stepwise approach to introducing agency, to a piece of software. And I mean, I think OpenAI mentioned that computer use agents is about 30% accurate compared to humans, up to 50%. There are a number of studies. So the accuracy in terms of a general purpose computer use or web browsing agent is not there yet. But I like this notion where companies are introducing this, different increments of agency. And then quickly, a last thing that was also alluded to is also the cost, right? So there's also a very good study that's called agents that matter. And it's really good how they look at the cost of running the agent and what's the return on investment. And that's a very important thing because it's got to match the actual solution or the use case. So agents needs to matter. The result needs to cover the cost at least, or some revenue or some cost saving.
Yeah, didn't Jensen just recently at, is it GTM, essentially came out and said that it's going to be thousands of times extra compute to be able to process agents. So computationally, it's going to be a very big lift for organizations. Welcome,
Welcome, Sean. We're so glad that you were able to make it. We are going around and discussing what we're seeing in the AI agent landscape. Let's maybe give you a second to get settled. But, do you want to give us a quick overview of just what you're seeing in general in like what you're working on when it comes to autonomous agents?
Sure, and check. Is the audio okay?
Yeah.
Okay, it actually works, and then I'm in color now. I thought I was gonna have to call for Annie M and Toto for a second, so I guess that's good. I guess the audio's good, even though virtual background, so
Like-
AI must be in the matrix. Yeah.
I was going to say we have the same interior designer. So yeah, just a really quick, and then we'll go around and answer the questions. I know you're just joining, so you can get a sense of what, where the discussion's going. But yeah, what you're seeing in AI agent space.
Cool. I'll be quick because again, I'm far from the star of the show. And in terms of where I'm seeing in my own personal capacity, in terms of not representing anything in terms of my workplace and whatnot, since I'm more in the defense and national security field, you are going to see these things that are going to help out like enterprise level, same things you would see in terms of either the traditional on rails kind of automation you'd see in terms of robotic process automation, but just better and for more tasks, all the way up to here's like a data scientist in a box sort of thing. I guess the other things that I'm tasked to do and I look at would also be on the adversarial side and the counter adversarial side. So always looking at aspects of the security of these things and how people from, different sort of funny prompts to other sort of things you can do in terms of, evasion and the whatnot. That's going to be something that I'm always going to have an eye on as well. So not to be like the Simon Cowell and be like, I know how to hack that in terms of the panel, but that will be some of where I guess my mindset of even in terms of work I'm going to be coming from. So let me end it there so we can get to the good stuff.
Thank you. Lorenzo, what about yourself? You are up next. Where are you seeing the architecture changing?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the 3 segments again, right? From user experience to agent experience or AI experience to then a developer experience. So Mike mentioned kind of like how agents can overcome constraints of people. One, when you're navigating a website, we have to scroll as people to collect information. AI agents don't have to. They have the full scope of HTML, the metadata, everything that lives within a web application or a website that you're navigating, right? We see things like deep research navigating through so many like websites in parallel. We can't do that as fast as I can. It's non-compete there, right? Let's change it to the developer perspective. There's this concept that's kind of hot right now called MCP. So can anybody who has an internal or external service now as a developer create a wrapper or a tool that enables any LM to communicate with this? Right now it lives on-prem, but we could foresee like a future where every service kind of is within one standard, one protocol, and in interchanging between that communication chain, any agent, any LLM can communicate with your service. So there's this kind of like concept of agents are kind of like the end of SaaS applications. You don't need like a wrapper or a CRUD application anymore. When you at your company or a business, you don't need to like an external CRUD system just to query SQL data, right? Everything lives on-prem, everything lives on your cloud. You could just execute that. You want data analysis tools, boom, your agents are doing that for you. They have the right access, they have the right protocols to securely authenticate into that platform or into that service. So again, from the 3 concepts, like we're starting to see this when it comes to scraping the web, to doing agentic automations. I think Chris Wright mentioned RPAs. These are use cases that have been built but that takes so much time and engineering efforts to just maintain and build out. But with AI agents, you could begin to see just rapid, value, getting to zero to value in just, a lot of time saved, so instantly going from zero to value. But then, again, yeah, just wrapping that from an experience level, it's just gonna execute things so much faster on your behalf. Yeah.
So
Right.
I have some questions, and this, feeds into some of the conversations we were having a little bit earlier today. There are a lot of risks in just letting an agent have full domain of a network. And as you mentioned, it's on-prem now, but there are a lot of not just risks that can harm people, but risks to it actually functioning and working, right? As we mentioned earlier, there's know your customer laws, there's banking laws, there's validation rules across platforms to be able to use them. And so I'd like maybe to switch to a little bit of what are the risks in harming humans and just not working correctly? And what are the risks in just that, not working correctly to complete a task, even because you can't authenticate or validate into a system?
Who do you want to start?
How about you?
Speak.
You're volunteering.
It's just me. Yeah. So I operate and have been operating in the healthcare industry for the last 20 years. So, healthcare is heavily regulated. The only other industry that's even comparable is finance. So, at this point, in my career, like the safety regarding the regulations as well as regarding the human factor, right? In healthcare, you have direct impact on people's lives, on their health, right? So nothing's more personal than that. So safety has to be at the forefront of any kind of solution development you do, whether it's a medical device or a new healthcare procedure or agentic types of solutions, right? And so one of the key lessons I've learned is number one, you have to have the adequate governance and monitoring systems in place to make sure that when you productionalize these solutions at production grade, specifically at enterprise level, that you are monitoring those models, whether they're LLMs or traditional AI models. They have to be monitored because data drift is going to happen, as well as hallucinations if you're dealing with LLMs. It's not avoidable. So you have to have the proper monitoring systems in place from a safety standpoint. And also, what things that we've learned over the last couple of years is it's important to have using AI to do the validation against AI models, right? Because nothing sort of like fighting fire with fire, but it's actually very, very effective. You can validate at multiple levels, whether it's the content that's being produced, like a summary in the case of generative AI, or in the case of what you're asking it to do in terms of like aggregation or extraction. You can literally leverage another AI model to perform the validation. So it doesn't have to be like multiple agent orchestration has to be performed. Nothing that fancy, but literally setting up your architecture to enable that. So that we found that to be very, very effective across the board. And the other piece is, again, so there's that validation piece, which is really, really important, but also, the governance factor. Your policies have to be set in place. It has to be meet regulatory standards. So you have to have that in place and have the human in the loop in order to make sure that whatever gets produced is going through and a human expert before it gets sent out and used in production level scenarios.
I have like an image in my head of an AI getting stuck in like a captcha loop with another AI letting the captcha out. And I obviously know that it goes farther than that, but it is fascinating how the infrastructure itself is having to change for
Yep.
agentic architecture.
Yeah, very much so. What about you, Sean? Where do you see vulnerabilities of this being weaponized?
Oh, I usually see the worst of the worst, but in terms of just where it's getting weaponized, you have these kind of folks who kind of just don't know. Well, again, there's an aspect of like folks who bless their heart in terms of a lot of things in the defense space. They're trying to catch up in terms of being AI aware. There's just things that there's an underestimation of how good these things are now in kind of like a social engineering kind of sense. I don't know if people know in terms of like the real threats around deepfakes right now are certainly on the auditory and they're very convincing, and the bane to call centers and general ledgers all around the world in terms of like folks pretending to be like a CEO or your CFO or whatnot. So there is this underestimation. And then there is that aspect in terms of overestimation, in terms of either seeing these things as objective observers and
Mm-hmm.
taking it as such in terms of whatever their assessments may be and not really looking at their biases. And then these things in terms of, again, like a underestimation on how easy these things are to get hacked, because when these things are built, they're usually built to be just to get them to work. And security is usually a secondary concern. And usually kind of the rule of thumb I've been saying in terms of is as more human-like and agentic as these things are getting, the more human-like they get, the more hacking them is going to look like what we call social engineering today and those kind of attacks. So hopefully, again, like for this bigger audience, I can put it out there and maybe they'll, when it comes time, I hope it never comes time, just to kind of like keep that in mind and thinking about how folks will exploit for opportunities. The fun ones right now are like, okay, like this AI said I got a free car, or I got these, like fun little things, but no, you can,
Dollar flights or whatever you're saying.
I mean, export control codes and like, like all sorts of things you can make these things spit out.
Shopping discounts.
So those are the fun, cute ones. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I'll leave it at that because that took too much time. Yeah.
Curious, take this kind of like across the board, Lorenz. So you are building these all day, every day. I'm curious, what have you come across that, people might not think about when it comes to risks and AI agents that maybe you discovered while building or you're seeing evolve that you want to address?
Yeah, what we've noticed is this term before, it was called SQL injections, right? Bad actors can just write query to retrieve data that they're not supposed to have access to. Now, with prompt injections, being able to kind of attack it from that standpoint, hey, actually give me a free car on my chatbot. And this is what we saw in the early like chatbots that were introduced. Right now, we have ways of being able to kind of detect that and also take guardrail steps when it comes to being able to safeguard and keep that from happening again. Mike alluded to observability or tracing, being able to understand what exactly is your LLM doing, what calls, what tools, bringing humans in the loop, people who are specialized in whatever domain use case that you're building, having them ensure the work or the outputs your LLM is doing is actually what is representative of what your use case is. By our framework nature, what we've implemented is these, again, building blocks of observability to tracing and then guardrails, being able to ensure no PII data is getting leaked, right? These are not just from the LLM standpoint, it is, but also just regular programmatic codes that you would have to write as guardrails. So there's just that level of being able to ensure that from the prompt level, you have guardrails and safety, not exposing PII, but also being able to harden that where bad actors won't be able to modify or change that from a kickoff or a runtime during runtime. So yeah.
All right. Yeah. Some excellent points, some interesting vulnerabilities. T and I were talking about this recently. Just AI just breaks differently than a regular cybersecurity threat. And there's so many more vulnerabilities because it's doing what it was trained to do based on that data, based on that human element. So it's fascinating. Cobus, how about you?
Yeah, just maybe a practical, well, everything that was said really resonates, and maybe a practical example. So we do quite a bit of implementations in the financial sector, and obviously what an AI agent does, it takes a complex input and decomposes that input into sub-steps, a sequence of sub-steps, and then executes that. And so what we've done in the financial industry is to follow a agentic workflow approach where people will have a co-pilot, so it's only internal. It's not to customers of the financial institution, but employees. And they will ask a question to the AI agent, and then they'll be presented with a sequence of events, right? So agentic flow. And I think Mike also alluded to that. So they've got the opportunity to review that. So this is the human in the loop portion, review the different steps, delete, edit, or make a suggestion, once they're happy, they execute it and it runs. So that's a way to augment and enhance the human, and also you create some kind of safety as well. Maybe just to mention two more things. The one thing is, I'm a firm believer that organizations should have their own hosted language model. It should be, self-hosted or privately hosted, a private instance of a language model. There's so many instances of model drift or catastrophic forgetting where models change under the hood. And then just lastly, there was this great research where the researchers took a AI agent that's capable of web browsing, right? So it's similar to OpenAI's Operator, I think is the name. And then they could so easily distract the agent with pop-ups, with phishing attempts, and the agent fell for all of these tricks, right? So we as humans, through pain and over time, we've evolved to recognize nefarious pop-ups and clicks and buttons that's false. But the web browsing agent, was really naive in that respect. So that was just a whole can of worms that opened. So yeah, that's interesting. But I think Michael alluded to more vertical implementations. So that's something we also see. If it's a narrow use case, a vertical implementation with human oversight, like agentic workflow, then it's more acceptable.
Love it.
All right.
Michael can go, and then you can grab the question.
Yes. What is the question? Are we still?
On just the risks, where are some of the risks that
Oh.
you see? Yeah, and vulnerabilities that could be detected. Is there anything high level that you'd love just to cover before we get the questions?
Oh yeah, something that wasn't. I mean, I agree with everybody. Kind of mentioned. Kind of covered the main risk. I'm surprised. I'm a little bit surprised that the topic of code generation, right, hasn't entered the. We haven't talked about it, and we're talking about risks, and it's sort of interesting to me. Early in about probably two years ago now, I was invited to speak to a panel of like 450 engineers at a well-known big box retail company. I won't mention the name to protect the innocent, but so I was sitting on this panel with like people from Google and NVIDIA, and we were talking about AI, generative AI at the time, because everybody's talking about that. And I asked the question of the audience. I said, how many engineers are using code generation tools, GitHub, or any of the co-pilots, right? And it was interesting to me at that time, it's 2 years ago, like half the room raised their hand, the other half didn't. And so I think if I was to, and I'm going to be returning to that organization again for another panel discussion. So I'll ask the same question to see if there's a change. But I think there's probably a bit of a change, probably more, I would say more engineers have adopted code gen tools. But, I don't think every engineer that I've talked to, and I have friends with a lot of engineers, I came from engineering. And so I think that it sort of is a commentary on not only the attitudes of the engineers, but also the risk factor that's involved in leveraging these tools that get more and more powerful, and in their ability to code, is ultimately going to be better than any human, because it's a machine, right? I mean, let's be honest, like no matter how good we think we are as a coder, like we're never going to be good as the machine who like lives on code, right? So eventually the machine is going to be better at this skill, because that's what it does for a living, than the humans that create it. And so I think there's inherent risk with that, right? Both from a jobs perspective, look at the impact on the AI has had already on the job market already. So I think that's interesting and often not talked about in these discussions, but I do think it's a legitimate risk.
So what are your thoughts just quickly on it? I know we said we would jump, but because we're talking about code, what about Trojan horse code and people that have got any of these open source models embedding something in them? The moment you use it, you're basically susceptible to a hack or a vulnerability.
Right. I think, Lorenzo talked about it, and like, I think, this is inherent if you're, going to leverage open source in particular. You just have to have, the proper monitoring, the proper filtering that's built into, whatever platform you're leveraging for your agent builder or orchestrator. And I'm seeing the tools, like Crew getting, more and more powerful in that realm and that feature set. So that's a good thing. But you also can't ignore the fact, just following basic, good policies regarding like deployment of software, evaluation of software, right? There's, architects like myself that, part of their job is to do that platform evaluation. and to set up those governance policies as you in not only when you're building and designing the solutions, but also in your as part of your deployment process. So some of that is just really, really good following good DevOps practices to prevent those things from happening.
Great, thank you.
I have so much to say and ask and can nerd out about this all day, like nail on the head, but I do want to get to the questions that we have in the chat. We have 2 questions from Felipe, who says, "Thank you for the great talk," and wants to know, where do you currently see AI agents primarily being hosted on-premise, cloud, or hybrid environments? And considering the democratization of computing and AI tooling power, how do you envision these hosting strategies evolving over the next few years? And then I'm just going to say the second part of the question, and then we can go and popcorn answer. Second question is also from Felipe. How are we seeing the priorities of safety, accuracy, scalability, and cost reshape deployments for both personal and enterprise use? So a lot in there. Really excited to hear what each one of you has to say. Michael, you just went. Let's go background and circle. Sean, what do you think?
For both of those, and again, I'm gonna keep on my okay. It has the answer. This technology and this platform is awesome. Okay, so I can even it right from my face. You can tell me I'm in San Antonio, Texas. Again, everything is just big old country bumpkin. Both of those kind of questions do just kind of rest on again like how much security and whatnot. Like your operations kind of operating under. If you're an app that kind of, my AI shows you what you're going to look like in 30 years, you're probably not going to need the kind of security of, folks in terms of, working with satellites or different or cybersecurity aspects. But in terms of a lot of stuff, in terms of Department of Defense and whatnot, you hear this thing in terms of like edge kind of computing and getting things on edge. And a lot of that is like getting these things more on prem than ever before. And again, just kind of knowing again like what your different threat vectors are, be in terms of do you need these things to be on prem? Oh, if everybody can, yeah. Let me leave it on that, and then yeah, we'll bounce around on that.
All right, I want to maybe go to Lorenze.
Yeah, you can notice it from a perspective of 2 personas, an individual and then an organization. An organization, at least for folks at Crew, are asking for on their own self-hosted provider, on their own cloud or on
Yeah.
prem for themselves. But from an individual layer, let's say day to day, I want to run certain tasks on my own computer on prem. We see tools like Olama shaping up, and this is a popular way of being able to leverage open source LLMs or models and leveraging like the toolkit from within your own computer. So if you have something like a Mac or maybe NVIDIA digits, if whenever they come out, right, you're able to leverage these AI tools within your own infrastructure as a even as a personal user. And I think as these technologies get better and better, they're also going to get cheaper and cheaper for an average consumer. So a supercomputer back then is now something that can fit in your bedroom, right? So just like the accessibility of these super powerful tools can be consumed and used by people like us as like a day-to-day consumer. So yeah, all of the above, who depending on whoever it is, I see it being cloud or on-prem for enterprises, but also the same for you as an individual.
Big fan of Olama and anything else. I have it both on-prem and in cloud, and like just I have so many different variations of it, and I'm sure the help team there is tired of hearing from me.
I just want to, in the interest of time, just double click on what you said, Haley and Lorenzo. I think the big impediment used to be the language model. And I'm reminded of how NLU models, evolved. Eventually, they lived on edge, on devices in your house. So I think I've been playing around quite a bit with quantization and also model distilling, and just the whole idea of creating this small model you can make use of that's highly capable, highly trained for your use cases, and then run it, virtually anywhere, everywhere. That's it.
All right, and last and certainly not least in this round, Robin, Michael.
Just just to piggyback on what Cobus said, I think, and I also I agree with him in the trend that I'm seeing, particularly in building agents. Having the ability to build with the smaller language models, deploy, in your private environment, where they're, that's on-prem, and your own, your own, kind of private cloud environment. I think that's in the heavily regulated environments like finance and healthcare, that's an absolute must. And what I'm seeing is, definitely a trend in at least my own personal like agent building. So on my own private platform, Lorenzo said, like we're getting more access to these platforms to build our own agents. I myself have this, I probably spend too much money on agent tech, right? So, but you don't have to spend as much money as I do on this technology, but I do it for a living, right? So I can justify that to my wife. So justify my toys, like every subscription in the planet, right? But I think personally, like that's at least right now, that's definitely like what I'm seeing. Like if you want to experiment, build agents, or just work with, whatever language model you want, you're going to have to pay the price. It's not free, whether you're OpenAI or your own network. So in regard to the enterprise, largely it depends on the organization and their technical strategy. So the CIO, CTO determines that. But I'm definitely like across the board, across the companies, across my peers, architects, like, multi-cloud definitely is the trend, which I think is smart. And then, having an on-prem option, that's definitely, what I'm seeing in terms of like development at the enterprise level for these types of deployments. And I think that's a good thing. And you're going to see, if you're going to build agents, that one of the key lessons that I've learned personally is, if you go with the smaller language models and you fine tune the model or you customize it, you're probably going to get better results than going with like the big reasoning models like an R1 in an typical agent type of solution, because you can literally tailor your responses more effectively by leveraging the smaller models.
Yep.
So I know that we need to do the demo next, right before, and T is going to introduce that. But right before, I just want to do one quick sentence, one just quick thought. What are your thoughts on the future of agentic agents? One sentence, first thing that comes to mind. Let's go backwards this time. Michael, we'll go the other way. So start with you. One sentence.
One sentence for agents: immense independence and freedom.
Okay.
Ooh.
All right.
Accuracy will improve immensely.
Okay.
It's getting this.
And scalability. I'm excited about scalability.
Yeah.
You, Sean?
True.
Lorenze, say transforming the workspace.
Great.
And Sean.
Another thing for me to worry about.
But yeah. Fair. Well, with that, I want to thank our panelists. They are not only experts that are leading in the field, but the reason we had a panel from different diverse backgrounds from a building standpoint was to have a different point of view, which is great. Please follow them on LinkedIn. If you can't find them, I've posted them on LinkedIn. There's links to everyone's bios. Follow them, follow their content. And a shout out also to AI Circle. We're also members of AI Circle. We love AI Circle. So a shout out to everyone at AI Circle.